Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Judges chapter 20. Going to be starting in verse 2 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16. Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we begin here in verse 2, in verse 1, we see that the children of Israel now come together. And they are gathering in Mizpah, which is only a few miles away from Gibeah to the north. And they gather together, and let's pick up in verse 2, where it says, And the chief of all the people, even of all the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in the assembly of the people of God for 400,000 footmen that drew the sword. Now, it says here the chief of the men of Israel, and this Hebrew word for chief is pinoth, and it means cornerstones. Now, these cornerstones, or these chiefs, were the leaders of Israel that helped to bind and to keep together the rest of the children of Israel. A great host of soldiers come together out of all parts of Israel to deal with this sin that has taken a foothold in the city of Gibeah. And the only city that did not send any soldiers was Jabesh Gilead. And we see that in chapter 21, verses 8 and 9. You'll see that later in next chapter. Now, verse 3 says, Now the children of Benjamin heard that the children of Israel were gone up to Mizpah. Then said the children of Israel, Tell us, how was this wickedness? Now, it's very possible that the Benjaminites also received a part of the body, the dead body of the woman. And that was also a call for them to come to Mizpah against their own city, against the sin of their own city. But they were not only not going to go to Mizpah to join in on the battle against Gibeah, but they would actually defend the people's right in Gibeah to live how they felt, how they pleased. Now, it is possible that the Benjaminites would deal with Gibeah themselves. Again, we don't know. We don't know if Gibeah was somehow they were like offended that these their other tribes were coming to deal with a problem in their territory or not. We don't know if they got offended and they were planning on dealing with this sin themselves. But again, probably not, because this is not stated that they were intending to do anything against Gibeah. The Levite also, he made the trip from his hometown from Ephraim down to Mizpah. So you have the tribes of Israel are all gathered at Mizpah, and now you also have this Benjaminite that comes there with the other tribes at Mizpah. Now let's read verses 4 through 7, and it says, And the Levite, the husband of the woman that was slain, answered and said, I came into Gibeah that belongs to Benjamin, I and my concubine, to lodge. And the men of Gibeah rose against me, and they beset the house round about upon me by night, and they thought to have slain me. And my concubine have they forced, that she is dead. And I took my concubine and cut her in pieces and sent her throughout all the country of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly in Israel. Behold, ye are all children of Israel, give here your advice and your counsel. Now, the Levite here is asked what happened, and he explains basically what happened. But the explanation of what happened that he gives to them is different than what really happened. He doesn't mention anything about their homosexual desires toward him. Therefore, listen now, therefore it is possible that the men that were gathered at Mizpah don't know anything about the homosexual tendencies of these men in the city of Gibeah. Not all the men in Gibeah, but that they probably, maybe they don't know what's going on. That it was because of the homosexual desires of these men. That's the reason why this all happened. It seems that the Levite willingly allowed his concubine to be given to those men. Therefore, the sin of the men of Gibeah is not adultery, which is Deuteronomy chapter 22 and verse 22. Their sin was not adultery, but it was gang rape and murder. Death was the penalty for both rape and murder. And we see that in Deuteronomy 22, verses 25 and 26. Now, it is possible that the Levite purposely did not reveal that he acted cowardly in this situation. In verse 5, he doesn't really tell the truth as it happened. Let's read verse 5 again. And it says here, and the men of Gibeah rose against me, and they beset the house round about upon me by night. And what? And they sought to slay me. Doesn't say, the real account is that they were there to have sex with him. Doesn't say that they were there to kill him. He says they sought to have slain me. And my concubine have they forced, that she is dead. Now, maybe he told them more than what's written. We don't know. But it seems that he's kind of really hiding, and he's not really telling them everything that's going on that happened that night. Now, let's read verse 8. And all the people arose as one man, saying, we will not any of us go to his tent, neither will we any of us turn into his house. The tribes now are united together in their execution of punishment upon Gibeah. He says here, none of us will go to our tent. Now, some of the Israelites that came to Mizpah, they still lived in tents. Now, this could be a carryover from when the children of Israel wandered in the wilderness. I'm sure that when the children of Israel took the promised land, some of them built houses, built barns, and they dwelled in houses. And some of them, they just got used to living in tents and like Bedouins, and they just continued to live in tents. But it also could be that because some of these Israelites took care of sheep and cattle, that they were basically nomads and lived out in the fields in tents and not really in cities and in towns. So when it says here in verse 10, we will not any of us go to his tent, neither will any of us turn to his house. They're making a mention of both houses and tents because some of them still lived in tents. Now let's read verses 9 through 11. But now this shall be the thing that we will do to Gibeah. We will go up by lot against it. And we will take 10 men out of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 of 1,000, and 1,000 of 10,000. To fetch victuals for the people, that they may do when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin according to all the folly that they have wrought in Israel. So all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. Now, in verse 9, they decide to cast lots to see which tribe would go up first against Gibeah. But they didn't think that they would be there too long. The men didn't bring a lot of provisions, so they chose out 1/10 of their numbers to go to neighboring towns and villages and cities to get food and water. Again, some of these people that came here, they traveled quite a ways from the east side of the Jordan River. And they traveled for days to get there, so they had to have provisions. And again, they're not coming in campers and that kind of a thing, bringing refrigerators and that. So when they get to Mizpah, they have to have food, and so they choose out 1/10 of their amount, basically 40,000 of them, go and they spread out and they go out into the country to find food for the provisions for all of them that are there. Now, let's read verses 12 and 13. And it says here, and the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribes of Benjamin, saying, what wickedness is this that is done among you? Now, therefore, deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and put away evil from Israel. But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of their brethren, the children of Israel. Now, the tribes in Mizpah, they demand that the children of Benjamin bring out the men that committed this crime, that the judgment of death could be executed upon them. We have to remember that the sinful state that the Benjaminites were in was because they disregarded God's law through Moses. It is possible that it is only about 20 years since Joshua has died, which means that God's law would still be known to them, to the Benjaminites and to all the rest of the children of Israel. So in chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, it says, the angel of the Lord. And the angel of the Lord reminds all the children of Israel of the conditions of the covenant that God made with them. Therefore, they are without excuse. So don't get the idea that the people of Benjamin and the people of the rest of the people of Israel, that, the law has gone out of their mind and they don't know anything about it, that kind of thing. No, the law of Moses, the law of God, is still somewhat on their mind. They know, they're without excuse. They know that what's going on in Gibeah is wrong. And the problem is that the people of Benjamin, they are defending the sinful ways that are taking place in Gibeah. Now, it says here, but the children of Benjamin would not hearken. The children of Benjamin would not hearken. Now, back in chapters 19, verse 25, it was the sinful men that would not hearken to the words of the old man. When the sinful men surrounded the old man's house, he said to them, don't do this. And the Bible says that these sinful men would not hearken unto the old man. Now we have the whole tribe of Benjamin not hearkening unto the voice of the men that are in Mizpah. But now it is the whole tribe that Benjamin that they refuse to listen to reason. As I said back in verse 3 of this chapter, it is not likely that the Benjaminites have any desire to punish these men. They are defending Gibeah to live as they please. Yet, this is the approach that many people have today. Basically, you hear people in this world, they say, I just leave them alone. Let them live how they want to live. This will be, this will be okay if there's no God and no law to be accountable to. When you hear people, people who, how can I say, when there's problems in the world and there are problems in the city, and so just leave them alone. Everything will work out. Everything will be fine. Well, that would be okay if there was no God and if there was no law. But the fact that there is a God and that God has laid down his law, then it's not okay. Because eventually we are all accountable to God, our Creator, and to the laws that he has laid down. But mankind has a God, and God has given us laws whereby to live. And where there are laws, then there are penalties for disobedience. But do not misinterpret the long suffering of God, that nothing is going to happen. As I said in an earlier lesson in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 9, don't misinterpret the long suffering of God, the patience of God, that because God's long suffering, the reason why God doesn't bring judgment upon a nation is because he's long suffering, waiting for as many to be saved as possible. But if they don't repent, if they don't turn from their wicked ways and stop doing the sin, God's judgment is coming. We're going to finish in verses 14 to 16. And it says here, but the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities unto Gibeah to go out to the battle against the children of Israel. The children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew the sword, beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. Among all this people, there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hairbreadth and not miss. Now, the Benjaminites gathered together to battle against the rest of their brethren. Their pride and self-confidence reveals their depraved morals. When they should have taken God's side against this sin, they side with the people's depraved, sinful natures. It's never the right decision for people to side with sinful natures, with sinful acts. Their refusal to bring out the sinful men was an act of rebellion against God. And this is what we have to remember. We have to know and understand that when a nation refuses to give up their sinful ways, it's rebellion against God and his law and his word. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 6, don't you know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Because the Benjaminites had not dealt with this sin that's in their borders, there was a very real danger of it spreading. And if not the exact sin, then other sins would be free to start spreading to other towns and villages. Maybe the same exact sin won't be spreading from Gibeah to the rest of the nations, but sin itself will. Once you leave one sin alone and you don't deal with it, other sins will crop up and start spreading throughout the nation. When sin is not exposed and dealt with severe punishment, it infects a society and pollutes the land. These sinful men in Gibeah were like a cancerous tumor that needed to be removed. And yet one aspect that we do not see mentioned is that until these men are dealt with, there will be no blessing from God. It could be said that these sinful men in Gibeah are another type of Achan. As Achan's sin turned away God's blessings from the whole nation of Israel, so also the sin of these men could be said to do the same thing, turns God's blessing away from all the tribes of Israel because of what the sin that's taking place in Gibeah. How could the nation of Israel say that they are pure and holy when they allow sins like this to exist and continue? Neither can a Christian say that they are pure and holy when they harbor unconfessed sin in their heart and they take steps to defend their sin. Let's continue on in verse 16. Verse 16 says, among all the people there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Every one could sling at a hairbreadth and not miss. Now, it says they got 700 chosen men and they were left-handed. Now, what is interesting is that when Benjamin was born, that his mother Rachel named him Benoni, which means son of my pain or son of my sorrow. But Jacob, her husband, renamed him Benjamin, which means son of my right hand. We see that in Genesis 35, verse 18. Now, Ehud, which we'll see in a number of lessons, in Judges chapter 3 and verse 15, Ehud was also a Benjaminite, and he was left-handed. So I don't really want to read too much into this, but it seems interesting that the writer mentions that they were left-handed. I mean, it was unusual in those days for to be left-handed. Like today, there are left-handed people in the world today. They write left-handed. They do everything basically left-handed. But the majority of people are right-handed. And it's interesting, though, that the tribe of Benjamin, which his name means son of my right hand, that the writer of Judges here writes down that these were 700 left-handed men. And so it just seems interesting that he makes that distinction. All right, we're going to continue in verse 17 next lesson, but until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.